Hello, Internet people. This is Corrupt Reverend, and this is installment 2 of my beginner's guide for making a D&D adventure and setting by a beginner. Just to recap and re-stress this fact, I am not a seasoned veteran of D&D. I just started about a year ago, and in that year I really haven't accumulated all that much experience doing it. However, it has definitely jumped into one of the into the place of one of the major passions that I've been having lately. I really like the whole everything about it. So, with that disclaimer, just keep in mind that everything I do might not be the best way to do it. I don't think in any creative endeavor there's a best way to do anything. There's just everybody's own personal way of doing things. Starting off, I want to show you, because in the first video I mentioned this, but I wasn't able to show you it. I mentioned when I was talking about resources to have in your back pocket, I mentioned that there are a lot of D&D related subreddits on Reddit, and I wanted to show you guys, but Reddit was down at the time, so I wasn't able to. And it's up again, so now I can show you. This is my my personal D&D multi-Reddit, and in this I have the DM Academy, D&D, D&D 5e, D&D Behind the Screen, D&D Next, Jerry Mapping, Lore Masters, Map Making, Matt Colville, Mini Painting, Terrain Building, and World Building. Those are like the main subreddits that I've found that are fairly active and offer the most for me. There are a whole slew of other D&D and just general RPG and writing type subreddits, and you can go through and search and find them for yourself. I'll include a link in the description of this video if I can figure out how to post a link of my personal multi-Reddit thing. I'm not sure how to do that. I'm like reasonably certain there's a way to do it, but I don't know how. So hopefully I'll figure that out and I can give you guys this little nugget of resources. Now, last we left off, we had just got into, what did we get into? We were finishing up on the lore of the island of Dorum'Tel, and we were pretty close to finishing that, and there's not a whole lot left of the material I've already made, so hopefully either the end of this video or in the next. Actually, spoiler alert, it's going to be in the next video. I know it's going to be the next video because I already made this video once, but my microphone was muted. And so now this is the second time I'm making this video, so I might skip some things, I might leave some things out. I'll try and not, but it might happen. So please bear with me. If you've made it this far, I urge you to hold your bearing. So, the history of Dorum'Tel. Where were we? We had figured out how our dwarves got on the island. We figured out where the crater came from, and I think that was the gist of it. So we've got our dwarves on the island, we've got our crater finally, and the reason why it's there. So now we're going into sort of the second half of the history that will lead into what will be the current time for when the player characters arrive on the island. Not much left. So, got the dwarves, got the crater. The next thing that I wanted to do was kind of start explaining the rest of the unexplained. The last video I talked a little bit about this little settlement here of Koldar Narinth. I'll go a little bit more in depth in this video. A big part of it, of the history that I needed to resolve, is all these forests. These are really large forests, And if you recall in the first video, the reason that I gave the dwarves to start mining, even though they were just subsisting when they first landed on this island, they needed to quarry rock to make their houses and stuff. So there weren't trees. Suffice to say, there were not trees when they landed. Now there are a shitload of trees. How did they get there? I thought about making it like they planted them. They shipped in saplings and they started planting trees to harvest and stuff. I didn't really care for that. It could be like druids did it. It seems like a thing druids can do, but that wasn't doing it for me either. So we've got the crater. It's magical, and a recent event that made everything in the mine magical. So why can't these be magical forests? Why can't this be a magical lake? So that's what I ended up going with. I decided that the magic that made all the ores and gems in the mines so special now also caused specifically this forest right here inside the crater to spring up with unnatural haste, and with it, it brought a lot of strange creatures, odd flora and fauna. So, basically, that's what got me into thinking about the next piece of the history, a new beginning. This is post collapse of the Inselberg. So, where are we now? The forest, of course. So, we've got these magical forests, and they spring up. And I decided it has something to do with the magic that came through the ancient planar portal when it was destroyed or sealed off in some manner by the half-elf sorcerer Treyandril. But I don't want the inhabitants to know necessarily everything about that yet. So this is kind of like DM knowledge. This is God knowledge that it is the planar portal magic that created the forests. The dwarves don't know why the forest grew. They just knew they showed up after their savior saved them. So in his memory, they named the forest after this half-elvish sorcerer. So that forest is named the Forest of Treyandril, the forest on the inside. But when that forest sprung up, they hadn't built Kuldar Narinth yet. There wasn't a tunnel, so it was still contained. It wasn't until they made the tunnel for access to Kuldar Narinth that the forest made its way through the tunnel and took root outside of the crater and sort of spread from there. It's only gotten so far. I haven't decided why. I mean, these are sort of like just hilly field land. Maybe it's just not that suitable, even though they're magical forests. I'm sure they like some suitable ground. And obviously the forest didn't travel up this way because this is like desert wastelands. So we've got our forest sorted out, why the forest is there, because I wanted forest to be there. Obviously, it was on the map. I had to come up with a reason for them to be there, since I already said that there were not forests when the dwarves first arrived. So we got the forest figured out. Sweet. What do we have left? We're starting to zoom in here, aren't we? We're zooming in. We're zooming in on the forest, the wilderness areas, and now we're going to zoom into some of the settlements. We need to come up with explanations for these settlements. A biggie was this guy out here. I had to think of a reason why a settlement popped up in the middle of a desert. That's generally not a place that people like to live, unless they have to. And I didn't want to have like an outcast society necessarily. I wanted them to be there of their own volition. And so I started thinking about why people would go and live in the desert. Generally, that's going to be because they want some some degree of isolation from the rest of the populace. So who would want that? Why would they want to remove themselves from the city of Takmir? Well, another thing that I think about when I think of like an isolated society is I think of religion. You see a lot of like monasteries and temples that are far off places so that the practitioners can focus on their faith-based practices. So that's a pretty good idea, and that's what I ended up going with. I decided that this is where the clerics of Dumathoin decided to move to. But why did they decide to move there after this? Because I decided like that was a fairly new settlement. It happened after the crater formed. Why would they go there? So, to explain that, I decided they wanted to remove themselves from the epicenter of commerce of the island. They're like a religious order, right? So they shouldn't be influenced by money. And after that first invasion, a lot of the clerics felt that maybe greed is what caused it, right? They don't know about a planar portal. They just know something happened, and they think it was the greed of the miners going too deep and causing this. So they wanted to separate themselves. And I decided like maybe they're part of a council, because I wanted like a royal family. I wanted royalty, but I didn't want necessarily a monarchy. I wanted a council. So it would make sense on an island primarily inhabited by dwarves to have council members that are part of an order for Dumathoin. And in case you're not aware, Dumathoin is a god, like basically a dwarven god of like mines and everything underground, more or less. And that's borrowed from Forgotten Realms, because at this point I don't feel like making my own pantheon. I'm just going to use the Forgotten Realms pantheon, because they have such great deities already. No reason to reinvent the wheel. I'm not going to be selling this campaign. I don't need to worry about copyright stuff. So, the clerics of Dumathoin are on the council. I think I named the council somewhere. Yeah, the Council of Narenth. Narenth meaning the House of Nar is the ruling family, which I think I touched on the last thing. Sort of some of the naming conventions that I'm putting together for the Dwarvish language in my world. So they are council members. So it's probably they probably still have a church or whatever in Takmir, but the bigwigs, the higher up clerics, probably spend most of their time out in this settlement, which I named Ket, because that sounds like a desert settlement to me. Ket, just a single syllable. It feels nice to say, and that was yet another naming thing where I just stuck some letters together to see what would stick. So now we've got that sorted out, what that is, what the settlement is, and why it's there. We've also got this thing. Obviously it's a cave, right? I knew it was a cave, I drew it as a cave, but why would there be a path going to a random cave, right? There's got to be some significance to this cave. Well, I put clerics for Dumathoin here. Why not put a shrine to Dumathoin in this cave here? That makes sense. That's believable, and I like the idea. It's sort of like a pilgrimage route to pay respects to Dumathoin up in this cave. And since there's at least one cave there, we know there's probably other caves, and unmarked caves to me say a breeding ground for goblinoids, for low-level cannon fodder for the adventurers to slice through on little mini quests. So that could give another purpose for the settlement of Ket, being that they are kind of the first line of defense against goblins and orcs and bugbears and such that come out of the caves up here in the north. So we've got the little cave thingy figured out. We've got Ket, this settlement figured out. One last settlement, and that is right here, this little village amongst the trees. So this is just another example of the obvious nature that I was introduced to fantasy with Tolkien, in that when I think elves, I think trees, and when I think trees, I think elves. So I'm going to have elves living in this village. I decided, like, again, that it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for that village to have existed before all the forests were there, right? So these forests sprung up, and the elves living in Takmir, they're like, hey, this is kind of interesting. We're going to check this out. So they ended up setting up shop within this forested area. And I think I have some stuff written about them. So let's go back and find out. I ended up naming that village Mirandil, kind of elf sounding. So the new outer forest gained interest from a small group of elves living in Takmir. Being more suited for life in the woods, they set up a settlement in Mirandil, where they act as wardens of the strange new flora and fauna. So I think I mentioned that again. This is the second time I'm making this dang video. With the forest and the lake came new creatures that didn't belong on the island. They weren't originally there. So they're basically like the guards of the forest to make sure these strange creatures don't wreak havoc upon the island. Situated beside Melody Falls on the eastern fork of the Kalek River. Again, those were blanks in this wiki for a long time. I just had situated beside blank on the eastern fork of the blank river, and eventually I came up with the names and plugged them in. And I don't know why I made Kalek River and Melody Falls clickable. I don't know, actually, I think I could put in a little bit of lore about Melody Falls. I don't think I'll really talk much about the river. Anyway, the village is mostly self-sufficient. Still, the elves of Mirandil keep shops within Takmir, where they offer enchantment services and sell helpful elixirs. So we've got potion making and enchanting elves that actually live outside of Takmir, but they do business within Takmir. So that takes care, I believe, of all of the settlements that I had drawn in here without any plan of what to do with them. I still have to explain why Coldar Narinth is ruined, right? Because I just drew that ruined. I liked the way it looked, but I still had to figure out why it was ruined. I just built it as far as history goes. Like, basically all this stuff sprouted out in the economic boom that came after they realized the nature of the gem and ores in the mines after the collapse of the Inselberg. You know, there is suddenly, they were doing well before, now they're doing really well. And so that's what sprung up, and well, save for, you know, the Ket that was try and put some distance between the churchy people and the money. So we've got the broad strokes of the different settlements figured out. Now it's time to zoom in, and just like last time for the entire island, I started with a map. That's the exact same thing I'm going to do with all of these little settlements. Is I'm starting with a map. So the first settlement I'm starting with is Takmir, the sort of like capital city. So for Takmir, I started on a map, and this is my map of Takmir. It's not final. This is just kind of a rough thing to give me to spark my imagination. I'm not happy with the layout of the buildings and stuff, and there's obviously a ton of empty space. but it gives me enough to work on. So we've got a walled city. We've got the port over here. I know that generally walled cities, they aren't walled. Walls don't do very well with cities because cities tend to grow, right? And they're going to outgrow their walls unless they build up, but or down. But generally speaking, cities will outgrow their walls. So I wanted a walled portion of the city where kind of like the bigwigs, the elite live, and also like the majority of like the more prosperous businesses uh, take place. A lot of the major commerce, and then I wanted an unwalled area where you have the houses and living quarters of all the working class, and you have the heavy industry like the smelting of ores and shipbuilding, and where fishmongers bring in their catch and things like that. So that was the first thing I did when I'm zooming in. I'm zooming in now to the city of Takmir. Got my map here. So it was time to start filling it out. So let's find a thread for Takmir. Here's Takmir. This is what I've got. Like I said, I knew I wanted 2 sections. I wanted to name the sections. I didn't want it just to be all Takmir, and I wanted words to describe the outside and the inside. So I decided to call the outside part, that's next to the port, call that Harborside. It makes sense. And since I already decided that the important people and a lot of the commerce goes on inside the wall, I already knew what was going to be out here. Even though I don't have anything drawn, I knew the basic stuff that was going to be out there. So Harborside is split roughly down the center by its main thoroughfare, the Trader's Walk, which stretches from the docks all the way to the Girdleshire Gate. And the Girdleshire is the name I came up with for the walled part of the city, Girdleshire. So girdle, like, walled or contained, and shire. So to the east of the walk, and also I didn't want just like an amalgamation. I wanted to further subdivide the sections of the city. So for Harborside, I decided to have a main road that comes from the docks that goes to the gate. And since most of the traders that are going in to do business inside of the Girdleshire are going to be going across this road, I called it the Trader's Walk. So to the east of the Trader's Walk, which is over here next to the port, is the heavy industry. That's the wrong thing. Here we go. Is much of Takmir's heavy industries: shipwright yards, masonry guilds, fishmongers, foundries specialized for the production of specific metals, and smiths of every kind. So that's what's going on the side, and that's about as in detail as I'll get for that area. I will have places of interest, like specific smiths maybe, or things like that. But as far as like the description of the main area of the east side of Harborside, that's about all I'm gonna put in. So then we've got the east. Now let's go down the center. The businesses along the Trader's Walk cater mostly to travelers, since that's where all the traders have to walk on it. So you'll find affordable food, lodging, and entertainment all along that walk. And that's the Trader's Walk is probably going to be where a lot of the locations that the PCs actually interact with will be, is the Trader's Walk. So while writing the rest of this and just thinking, I started thinking up places of interest. And these are just empty names. There's no ideas behind them, and these are mostly actually just placeholders. Like, these are not going to be the final names because, well, some of them might grow on me. But we've got the Happy Sailors Bar and Brothel, Harborside Playhouse, the Diggers Inn, and the Kraken Tavern. These are all things that would cater to travelers, to visitors to this town, and those are going to be the kind of things that are along the Trader's Walk. And I'm gonna have more than that, but that's the general idea, and I'll just add more as I think of them. There's no reason to have to sit down and think really hard about, like, okay, I got to think of every building that's on there, and that's something that I'm absolutely not going to do. I'm not going to have any idea of what every single building is, and there's probably only going to be a few buildings that are actually labeled as what they are. I'm going to have a list of points of interest, and I'll just plop them wherever is convenient for the story to progress. If there's something that I want the players to encounter, and I envisioned it over here, but they never go over there, I'll just plop it in a different building. Just keep it open-ended like that, because there's no reason it has to be in any specific location. So that's the Trader's Walk. West of the walk is populated mostly with housing for the working class. Intermingled with housing are the various simple shops dealing in everyday needs. So over on this side of the main road called the Trader's Walk, you've got all the working class people's homes, and intermingled around them, or within them, is just this, like the grocers, the cobblers, the businesses that more cater to the residents rather than travelers. That's all going to be in here, and there may be some reasons for the PCs to go in there. I don't know. I haven't decided yet, and I haven't really started picking out specific points of interest in there yet. I've mostly just been trying to think of what's going to be on the Traders Walk, because that's going to be the place that is most likely to gain the interest of them, at first at least. So that is what I've got for Takmir so far. Man, I am doing a lot better on time this take than I did on the last one. I could start fleshing out the Girdleshire a little bit, but I think the last video was 50 minutes long, and I think that's way too long. So I think the next video will start going into the Girdleshire. Is there anything else I was getting? Oh yeah, one other thing is every city, I think, needs some sort of like Thieves Guild or something. So I plopped the Thieves Guild in Harborside. I called it the Black Cloak Society. That was another blank that stayed there for a long time. I was going to call it the Black Hand, a la Godfather Part 2, but I decided against that. So the Black Cloak Society, the player characters would probably have something to do with them. Maybe they talk to the Paladins, and the Paladins want them to help infiltrate, or maybe the PCs decide that they want to join the Black Cloak Society. I don't. They're whatever it is. The Thieves Guild is not going to be inherently evil or anything. I don't like black and white bad guys. So there's going to be some reason why people don't mind them around. They might be more of like a nuisance, or just like something hush hush. Maybe they sponsor illegal gambling, and people actually like illegal gambling, so they put up with it, or maybe they steal from the rich and give to the poor. I don't know. Maybe that's something that we'll look into. That's kind of like more zoomed in that I want to go into right now. We're still in, we just came into the second degree of magnification, right? We got the island, and now we're zooming in to individual settlements. So I think that's where I'll leave you for tonight. Next up, we will go ahead and actually flesh out the Girdleshire, and hopefully by then I'll have a better map made, and I don't know, maybe we'll start adding some more businesses and points of interest. So thanks for watching, and until next time, take it easy.